Today I'll be looking at the question, married by taking or consummation? Which action defines the point when the New Testament starts calling a couple married? We'll start out with some definitions of terms here so that we know we're talking biblical language. So betrothal. Betrothal often started with a bride price. That was the beginning of the betrothal. It could be an agreement without a price, but usually it's a bride price that we see in the Bible. In Exodus 22:16, it says he endows her to be his wife by paying the bride price. Endow is a word involving the mohar, or the bride price. In 2 Samuel 3:14, David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Deliver me my wife, Michal, whom I espoused to me, for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." So he paid a bride price, unusual bride price, but he also betrothed Michal, and she became his wife. And betrothal is what makes a couple husband or wife. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, a man find her in the city and lie with her, then the outcome of that is that because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife, he's punished because he has humbled his neighbor's wife. So they're betrothed, she's the other guy's wife. We see this talked about when God is talking about his betrothal. "I'll betroth thee unto me forever. Yes, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and judgment." This is in Hosea. And it's saying, at that day, they shall call me my husband instead of my Lord. So betrothal is connected to the time when you start calling him a husband. We also see it in the New Testament, the story of Joseph and Mary. When Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost, and Joseph, her husband, was a just man. And the angel told Joseph, "Fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife." So they're husband and wife, they're betrothed, they haven't come together. So betrothal is when they become husband and wife, often starts with the bride price. Then we've got the definition of taking, which is also some passages called giving. It's usually called taking. A husband taking a wife occurs after betrothal and is when the couple begins living together. Technically, it could occur simultaneously with betrothal, but anyway, generally, this is the general order. After betrothal, when the couple begins living together. Deuteronomy 27, "What man is there that hath betrothed a wife, and hath not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her." So, he's betrothed a wife, he's got a wife that he hasn't taken yet. So he doesn't go to battle. Again, betrothal made her his wife, but he hasn't taken her. That's going to come after betrothal. It's usually associated with wedding feast and consummation. Jacob said unto Laban, "Give me my wife, my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. It came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, brought her to him, and he went in unto her. But it is distinct from the consummation, even though it's often correlated with the wedding feast. It's distinct from consummation. We see that in a couple passages. Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife, but knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son. So, even though he took her, he didn't consummate with her. So it's a distinct step from consummation. Genesis 24:4, "You shall go to my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac." Again, obviously the servant of Abraham isn't the one doing the consummating, so it's not. The taking is not the consummation. It's a different step. Leviticus 21:13, "He, the high priest, shall take a wife in her virginity." Again, if she's a virgin when he's taking her, then it's not inherently consummation. Adultery. So what is adultery? Adultery is a sexual sin involving a wife and another man. We can see that in Leviticus 20, where the man who committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death. "I will not punish your daughters when they play the harlot, nor your brides when they commit adultery." So daughters are doing a different sin than the brides that are committing adultery. Again, it's wives can commit adultery. And in Matthew, that whoever looks on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So again, this is heart adultery. It's not physical adultery, but it is tied to sexual. It's lust. Lust for a woman is adultery in the heart. So lust equals adultery. It's sexual here, it's sexual in each passage. So this one is a very key term because the question itself is what makes a couple married in New Testament language. So we need to define married, specifically talking about the Greek word family gameo, which comes from gamos, which is literally the wedding or the marriage. And while I'll draw from some Old Testament passages, the distinction between married and husband and wife, it's not quite as clear in Hebrew, and the New Testament passages are more important to this discussion. Once we understand the concept from the New Testament, we can apply it to the Old Testament, figure out some of that more difficult distinction. So gamos is the literally wedding or marriage. The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding. It's the marriage and the wedding. Some examples of gameo, which is pretty much always just translated straight up married. Matthew 22, there were with us 7 brethren. The first, when he had married a wife, deceased, left no issue. Mark 10, if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she commits adultery. 1 Corinthians 7:9, if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. So we've got instances of the gameo word family in here. All right, so from our definitions, we know the biblical order is first betrothal, then taking, then consummation. The question is, which point after betrothal makes them married, or gameo? Married in the Greek gameo sense of the New Testament. Matthew 19:4-6, and he answered and said unto them, have ye not read, that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. 1 Corinthians 7:10-11 says, unto the married, gameo, I command, not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband. But if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband. Let not the husband put away his wife. So in 1 Corinthians 7, we have Paul saying, this is what the Lord says, this is what Yeshua said. What Christ said here is that the married should not chorizo. And so we've got these words connected. Basically, what Matthew 19 is talking about is if they are no more twain, they're married. So it kind of connects it in together that what we're talking about is the married gameo idea. Now, I take this pretty literally, like the marriage permanence view. So once a couple has been joined or married, in the gameo sense, they're not to be separated. This makes it critical to know exactly what begins married. Because if they haven't reached the married state, if they haven't been joined, then he didn't say that they can't be separated. But if they have been joined, married, gameo, then for sure they can't be. So our question, what makes a couple married, gameo sense, beyond betrothal? There's 4 possibilities I came up with. Well, first, it's not connected to any human action. This is just, God just does it, and it's not connected to humans doing anything. Now this gets pretty absurd practically. Who is married? We wouldn't even know who's married. God joined 2 people. We don't know if they're joined or not. That makes it pretty impractical. I'm pretty sure this one's just absurd. Just sex alone. This has become a kind of popular idea recently in some Christian circles. I've already written an extensive article on that, saying that's a myth. Sex alone does not make marriage. I've got an article on that, and I'll put the link to that article in the video description if you want to see that covered. But basically, I'm not going to deal with that here. The other options that are after betrothal are the taking or the sexual consummation of the betrothal. My theory, the position that I'm holding here is that the concept of taking is just the practical arrangement of moving into the house or the room or the tent. It's a coming together to live in the same place. It's not consummation itself. It's not anything else, special. It's just literally a word for moving in together. And the concept of married, or gameo, is sexually active. So I'm reading gameo as a sexually active covenanted couple. The first time that they are sexually active is being the consummation. So I'll call that the consummation. So let's start through our biblical evidence for my theory, why I think that consummation, not taking, is the point at which betrothal turns into gameo. In the story of Joseph and Mary are betrothed when Mary conceives. Joseph considers divorce, but an angel tells him not to. So the angel was sent to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph. Tells her that she's going to conceive, so she's already betrothed. She's going to conceive later. Well, when Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, again, they're betrothed, not together, she was found with child, so she's already conceived while they're betrothed. Joseph considers divorcing her. Being a just man, not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. The angel tells him to take her, not divorce her. So Joseph wakes up from the dream and takes Mary. Then Joseph, being raised from the sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife. They travel as a still betrothed couple to Bethlehem. There Mary gives birth to Christ. In Luke 2, Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, is the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused, betrothed wife, being great with child. And so it was, that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. She brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, laid him in a manger. There was no room for them in the inn. So you've got them arriving in Bethlehem. They're still a betrothed couple. Joseph later has his marital relations, the consummation with Mary. He did not know her till she had brought forth her firstborn son. So later on he did, but not until after Christ was born in Bethlehem. So the key point here is that Joseph took Mary, but they were still betrothed, not yet married, or gameo, in the gameo sense. When you read through that storyline, it says that he took her, it says he didn't know her, and it says they're still betrothed on the way to Bethlehem. Now, the only objection that I've seen raised to this is one person who's saying taking is the key, suggested that Joseph only took Mary after traveling to Bethlehem. Now, there's some problems with this. One of them is that it would mean that Joseph spent 5 or 6 months planning to divorce Mary. And remember, he was considering between making her a public example and divorcing her. He wasn't considering marrying her at all until the angel tells him to. So he wasn't planning on, he was planning on getting rid of her one way or another. So he spent 5 or 6 months planning this divorce, but still took her to Bethlehem with him when she was 9 months pregnant with that plan in mind. Now, I mean, that's not totally impossible. People do crazy things. Certainly isn't the natural way to read the story. Then you've also got the fact that when they travel together, unlikely for a only betrothed couple that hasn't been taken, and they're rooming together in when there's no room for them in the inn. So, all right, the next piece of evidence that points to this theory is that the word unmarried, or the opposite, agamos, is it works well when you think of gameo as sexually active. So agameo is not sexually active. It doesn't work very well with the permanence view of marriage if it suddenly means not taken. 1 Corinthians 7, 10, and 11, unto the married I command, yet not I but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband, but and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband. Let her remain unmarried. Now, if the word that's the opposite of married, unmarried, means taking, then she's not taken anymore. And it kind of undoes then you would be saying this basically undoes the marriage. But it doesn't, because she could still be reconciled to her husband. So that doesn't work very well with taking. But if it means she's not sexually active, if gamos or gameo means sexually active, she can still have a husband, but she's unmarried. If she's separated from her husband, she's not sexually active with him. So then that word works exactly perfectly, just like you basically say, what's the difference between she's separated, they're not sexually active, but she could be reconciled to her husband. Later on in the chapter, there's a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord. So we've got virgin contrasted with, or virgin not contrasted, is compared to the unmarried. It basically is using two phrases that are synonyms, the virgin and the not sexually active, the unmarried. So you've got, in this sense, again, it works perfectly that the virgin is not sexually active. More biblical evidence. This one's more about why taken doesn't work well as married. The key point is that taking a wife can be done by a third party, which makes sense if, like my theory, it means the practical arrangements of moving in, but it's troublesome to the personal consent aspect of marriage if it is the determiner of marriage. If taking was the determiner of marriage, then when you take a wife unto your son, you did it, not your son. So taking is you making a covenant with her, or what is this taking? This taking doesn't work except as if it's just the arrangements of moving in. Yes, you brought her to the house, you brought her there and gave her to your son. Then taking makes perfect sense as just the practical moving in together. Again, you've got Jehoiada taking wives for Joash, Jehoiada the high priest. You've got Jeremiah telling them to take wives for your sons. In the story of Isaac, like we saw earlier, the servant went and took the wife for Isaac. It doesn't mean that the servant made them, it doesn't mean that the servant is married to Rebecca. You can take a wife for someone, so the taking is something that you can do for others. And so that makes it fit much better with moving in, just the practical bringing someone to the place where they're going to live with their future spouse, or taking the wife specifically to where she's going to live with the husband. Another biblical evidence is the wrong order connection. So the key point is divorce is specifically not allowed to those who are married, gameo. Deuteronomy has a passage where divorce is likewise not allowed. In that passage, it has sexual activity and then betrothal, showing that betrothal and sex together create that non-divorceable bond. So if you look at 1 Corinthians 7, unto the married I command, not I but the Lord, because remember it's connecting back to his statements about divorce and about remarriage. Let not the husband put away his wife. And then in the Deuteronomy passage, if a man finds a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, lay hold on her, and lie with her, and they be found. The man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver. She shall be his wife. There's a betrothal. So he's adding a betrothal by bride price to having already slept with her. Because he's humbled her, he may not put her away all his days. And again, this because he's humbled her, we saw earlier. Some people want to make that out to, well, it's because he basically forced her, but that's not the way that word is used. Just a couple verses earlier, it's literally used in a double consent scenario where it even states that they're both consenting. So it just means he basically took her virginity. So you've got a consummation. Well, you've got a sexual action with a betrothal together. Once he's done both of those, it doesn't say that he's gone and taken her or anything. Just a sexual action plus a betrothal equals no divorce. And that goes specifically perfectly back to what we see in 1 Corinthians 7. If gameo means sexually active, a couple that's been sexual would be married. They got their betrothal. They had their betrothal, and now they've become sexually active. Gameo. It's covenantal sex, covenant and sex. Let not the husband put away his wife. So then you have basically this is where the concept comes from, is that if you have both of those, then you don't have divorce. And you have that in both the Old Testament and the New Testament that way. Another point of biblical evidence is the question, are you burning? Answer, marry. So Paul tells those who are unmarried and unable to handle their sexual desire to marry. If this means less than a sexually active relationship, then his earlier statements don't really make sense. So he says that Satan might tempt a married couple because they're not coming together. Specifically, power of the body. It's specifically talking about the sexual relationship. Satan might be able to tempt them if they aren't coming together. So the thing that causes this temptation to go away or be minimized is the marriage bed. So then you have 1 Corinthians 7, 8 and 9 says, to the unmarried and the widows, it's good for them if they abide even as I, but if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it's better to marry than to burn. If marry means something less than have a sexual relationship, then they're still in that position of tempting. They don't have the power over the bodies. So marry has to be the sexual relationship, or it's not accomplishing what he says it's going to accomplish. And this one is like the absolute clincher in my mind that proves that you can't hold the marriage permanence view and hold that marriage is, the gameo is not sexual. It's not involving a sexual relationship. It has to include the sexual relationship, be the sexual relationship, or it's not going to work out with the marriage permanence view. In the marriage permanence view, marriage, the gameo sense, after divorce is ongoing adultery. It's not just one-time adultery. I had a study Bible growing up that said, just when they stood up and made that covenant with the next person, that was adultery. But then after that, as long as they say they repent for making that covenant, they can continue to live with the new divorced and remarried spouse, and that won't be a problem. That's not the case. Mark 6 tells us about Herod marrying Herodias, which we know was a divorced woman. He married her, and John said to Herod, it's not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. So it wasn't just the fact that he married her that was a problem, it was the ongoing relationship. Mark 10, chapter 11 says, whoever shall put away his wife and marry another commits adultery against her, and if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she commits adultery. And we've got pretty much the same thing that's in Mark with slight variations, similar language, Matthew 5, Matthew 19, Luke 16, and Romans 7. So it's quite solidified, and of course we've seen it a couple times in, it doesn't say adultery in 1 Corinthians 7:10, but it's saying you can't put her away. So it calls it adultery when you marry another and it's ongoing. Now, Abimelech took Sarah, Abraham's wife, but it was not sin, so it's not adultery. Abraham said of Sarah's wife, she is my sister. Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken. In Hebrew, that could easily be translated for taking that wife, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, yea, I know that thou did this in the integrity of thy heart. I also withheld thee from sinning against me, therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. So, if he had sinned, it would have been an unintentional sin. He wouldn't have had the same guilt, but it still would have been a sin. But God said, no, I stopped you from sinning against me by stopping you from touching her. So, if someone takes a woman who's still someone else's wife, that is not a sin. It's not adultery. So here's the key point. Since it is adultery, an ongoing sin, remarriage is adultery, an ongoing sin, it only works with a sexually active definition and not a one-time taking. Because adultery is a sexual sin. Adultery is not committed by taking another man's wife if there's no touching or sex involved. Adultery is committed when you gameo, marry after divorce, and adultery is ongoing, not a one-time sin when you marry or gameo after divorce. We find all that in Scripture, so gameo cannot make sense as an equivalent term to taking, but it fits exactly with gameo, meaning sexually active. So taking would be a one-time thing. There's no touching involved when it's just straight up taking. So if we plug in taking as the equivalent of marry or remarriage, then the marriage permanence view doesn't make sense anymore. But if we use sexually active, then yes, if you're sexually active with someone else's spouse, then you have ongoing adultery. If you're sexually active, it's not a one-time thing. It's ongoing. And if it's a sexual sin, which it has to be because it's called adultery, if it's a sexual sin, then it has to involve sexual action. So again, taking cannot be gameo. Only sexually active or consummation has to be the point that gameo or marriage starts. This one, like I said, this one is just really hard to go around. You'd have to discard the marriage permanence view, I believe, to not say that consummation, sexual, this covenantal sex is what marry means. It's what gameo means. Here's some notable passages, I call them. They're not quite to the level of evidence where I think that they deny one side or the other, but it is neat to see how well they work with the idea that the consummation is the point of being married, and that consummation comes after betrothal. So Jacob, in the story of Jacob and Rachel, Jacob arranges to work for a bride price. That's bride price creating a betrothal. Jacob says that allows him to consummate with Rachel, calling her his wife. At that point, again, consistent with what we see about betrothal. So when Jacob says, "Give me my wife, my days are fulfilled." He finished paying the bride price. Give me my wife. She's his wife now because they're betrothed, so that I may go in unto her. So basically, he's saying, yeah, I'm ready for you to move her in to where I'm living so I can consummate with her simply because I've fulfilled the betrothal deal. The taking or the giving here in this case sounds like just practical arrangements. So here's what Laban did. He made a feast. Came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, brought her to him, and he went in unto her. So sequence looks like is basically, here she is, brings her to him, and he goes in unto her. That doesn't say that there's anything else going on. Just that covenant where she became his wife by him fulfilling the terms of the betrothal is what gave him the right to go in unto her. And that's why, when he finally does go in unto her, it turns into a marriage instead of a betrothal. Other ones, Anna's length of marriage was counted from her virginity. Anna the prophetess, daughter of Phanuel, tribe of Asher, she was of great age, had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. Again, her length of marriage was calculated from the time of her virginity, so the married would start there. Doesn't use the word gameo in this passage. That's why it's on this list instead of in the evidence passage. Basically, Hebrews 13:4 says marriage, that's gamos, is honorable in all, the bed undefiled, whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. So you've got marriage being moral sex. You've got whoremongers, sex before marriage, and adulterers, sex outside of marriage, that are sin. Comparing, the comparison here is all sexual relationships. So again, gamos makes sense as sexual comparison. Again, like in our burning passage earlier, a betrothed man controlling his desire does not need to marry, but if he's not controlling his desire, he should marry, turning his virgin into not a virgin. If any man think he behaveth himself uncomely toward his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age, need so require, let him do what he will, he sinneth not, let them marry. So he can go ahead and gameo her. Nevertheless, he that standeth steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, hath power over his own will, so decrees in his heart that he will keep his virgin, doeth well. He doesn't need to marry her, gameo her, then he'll keep her as a virgin. If he doesn't keep her as a virgin, then he's going to gameo. So again, it works quite well as seeing Mary as a gameo, as a sexual point in the betrothal relationship. So then we look at, does this work throughout the Bible? And I say yes. I went through and looked at all the passages in the Old Testament where it uses take a wife or variations of that phrase, all the ones I could find. When it comes to the Old Testament, I found 72 verses with the phrase, or a pretty close replica of the phrase, 56 times. It just simply says take a wife without much other context. That phrase works nicely as a summary of the whole process of betrothal and moving in and consummating. If you think about it, if you just said 56 times when it says take a wife, you just said he betrothed a wife, then you don't have the whole picture because it is more than that. If you just said he had sex with a woman, then you also don't get the picture because you don't know about the whole thing. So when it says take a wife, wife meaning they're betrothed, take meaning they move in together, you kind of know that they're going to be consummating that. And so you can kind of basically say take a wife as a phrase that summarizes the whole idea of it. And that's why you see take a wife just used just by itself a bunch of the time. But then there are a few times where taking is used in a way where you know that taking itself is not marriage. So again, 10 times it's a third party taking a wife for someone. We talked about that earlier in the evidence. 4 times is about the Pharaoh Abimelech taking Sarah where it wasn't a sin to take her because he didn't touch her. We've got the one time betrothed wife is not taking her. We use that in our definitions. And then the last time that I see where it's talking about someone taking a wife is Isaac and Rebekah. And I could see someone trying to use this as an objection to my theory. So Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah. I'm saying that is what taking means. He brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He moves in with her. The moving in is the taking. But then it says, and she became his wife. And so someone is going to say, well, see, she became his wife through the taking. That would be the objection. Now, I think if you go a little bit deeper and you see that what it requires to make a betrothal in order for someone to be your wife, it requires consent from both the bride and groom. This is the first action that Isaac takes in the whole story where Isaac's consent is involved. So when he takes action to say, yes, I want this woman to be my wife, then that betrothal becomes fully active. So she became his wife when Isaac, by bringing her into Sarah's tent, puts his consent behind the entire betrothal that already had, Rebekah's consent and her father's consent, which we saw earlier in the chapter. So this the final aspect of a betrothal happens when Isaac, by taking action, makes her his wife. So I think this still works with the betrothal is what makes you husband and wife view. And I think it works quite well with the fact that it says brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took her. That's practically how he took her, as he moved in with her. In the New Testament, all the gameo and gamos passages, those are the ones we're looking at to see what their definitions are. How does this conclusion work when all the passages about them are considered? So we've already explored many of them. The breakdown, I say, works quite well with what we've seen. There's 43 verses total. 15 are gamos, where it literally means the wedding feast. 9 are where it uses in a double phrase marrying and giving in marriage, which are generally referring to the flood, where it says they were marrying or giving in marriage until the flood came. Or 2, they're not being married in eternity, where he says the children of this age marry and are given in marriage, but not so in eternity. So again, it's just there's not really any context there to tell us exactly what it means. It's just giving us those words. 7 times it's used in 1 Corinthians 7. There is one place in 1 Corinthians 7 that has some bearing on this that I did not cover here. It's verse 27 and 28, and it is used as an objection to this theory. It really needs its own video. That objection doesn't actually hold up when you look at closely what that passage is saying, but I decided it needed its own video for the objection, the main objection that could be raised against this theory. 6 times it calls remarriage adultery, as we saw earlier. If it's going to be adultery, it needs to be sexual. So again, gameo being adultery, remarriage being adultery means gameo is sexual. Twice it's promoting marriage of young women. Once just false teachers forbidding to marry, an excuse for not coming to the wedding in a parable. The marriage is honorable passage, which we looked at, and Herod marrying Herodias, which we looked at. So again, it works in every single passage, and especially in the case of the remarriage equal adultery, and in most of the spots in 1 Corinthians 7, it really works quite well with it being sexually active within a covenant. So in conclusion, we look at Matthew 19, 4 through 6 again. For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. So ultimately, with betrothal being the covenant that makes a couple husband and wife, so he has his wife that he can cleave to, and then taking being the moving in, the cleaving, and sexual consummation become one flesh, as the step that makes the couple marry. That's the step that where they are no more twain, but one flesh. Then we have a paradigm that matches Christ's words here exactly. We've got a taking of, you've got a betrothal, becoming a wife, taking that wife, moving in together, sexual consummation after the taking, and then they're one flesh. So, what makes a couple married in the New Testament gameo sense? The sexual consummation of an existing betrothal. I'm Joshua Williams for Daring Theology.